the KMNN studios, this is the Kids Morning News Network.
Good morning, friends. It's October 9th, 2024. Welcome to the Kids Morning News Network podcast. I'm Alex in the KMNN studio. And today is National Stop Bullying Day, which is part of National Stop Bullying Month. That's all of October. But hey, let's do one better. How about National Stop Bullying Year? Every year. What can you do to stop bullying? Well, you can recognize when it's happening and be a friend to someone who's being bullied. You can report it to grown-ups. And if you're the one being bullied, know that you are not alone. I know it feels that way because I got bullied. And I bet if you Google your 3 favorite celebrities, at least one of them has a story about being bullied also. But we are all in this together. So let's all stop bullying together too. Holy cats, there's another hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico right now. I want to talk about how they form and why they form, so if you don't want to hear about hurricanes right now, go ahead and skip to the next story. Back in May, we talked about how tornadoes form. Hurricanes are a bit different because the key ingredient in a hurricane, also called a typhoon in the Pacific, is water. Warm water, which is why hurricane season is now. The Atlantic has had all summer to warm up. Hurricanes and typhoons are both tropical cyclones, meteorologically speaking. Tropical because they form in the tropics, the area around the equator. And cyclones because they are a big air mass that spins around a middle point, called an eye. Here's how it happens. Imagine the ocean is a giant bathtub. The tub is filled with warm water down near the equator. Because the water is warm, it makes the air above it warm too. And this warmer air rises up like a balloon, and it pulls a lot of moisture that's evaporated from that warm ocean with it. When the air rises, it leaves a low pressure area behind it. And that low pressure area is like a vacuum cleaner, sucking in more air from all around. As the air rushes in, it starts to spin. This is because the Earth is round and rotating. And that rotational pull on the wind is called the Coriolis force. The storm is so big that the northern and southern edges are on parts of the Earth that are spinning at slightly different rates. And P.S. hurricanes can only form away from the equator. A storm that forms right on the equator doesn't spin. There's no Coriolis force acting on it, so it can't make a cyclone. The spinning air gets faster and faster, just like a figure skater spinning faster when they pull their arms in. As the air spins, it cools down and forms clouds. Those clouds can dump lots of rain and bring strong winds. When all those come together, you have a hurricane. The flip side of this is that once hurricanes move over land, their fuel is cut off and they usually lose power very quickly. We've been talking a lot about the ISS lately, especially since 2 astronauts got stranded there when their capsule wasn't safe to carry them back to Earth. They've been up there since June, and they won't come back until February at the earliest. So the question I've been wondering, and maybe you have too, is what's it like up there? What is life on the ISS like, 250 miles above the surface of the Earth? Well, first of all, it's pretty big. ISS is 356 feet long, which is just 3 feet shorter than an American football field, including the end zones. NASA says that inside it's the size of a 6-bedroom house, and it has 6 places for people to sleep, but they're just little mini bedrooms about the size of a phone booth or a small closet. It's also got 2 bathrooms and a gym, and 1 big bay window that the crew can look out of and see all around them. Astronauts sleep in sleeping bags that are strapped to the wall. Since there isn't much gravity, it doesn't really matter that they're standing up. In their little bedroom, they have a tablet and a laptop and a pair of headphones so they can send messages home or watch videos. You know, all the stuff you normally do in your bedroom. It's their personal space. Which is important because their days are mapped out in 5-minute blocks that are set by mission control back on Earth. And you thought your day was overscheduled. There's just a teeny tiny bit of gravity, which is fun, but with their bodies not having to work against gravity, the crew can lose muscle and bone density. Their muscles get weak and their bones get weaker. So they have to work out, get this, 2 hours a day. Good thing there's a lot of food, and a few different choices too. Each country sends food for its own crew members, so the crew can eat dishes from all over the world. NASA crew members can choose what they want from a menu of more than 200 things. But that's it for as long as they're on board, months at a time, and not a lot of fresh fruit or vegetables. The ISS has an acre of solar panels to give it power, and they're reflective, so at dawn and dusk, when the sun is over the horizon for you, you might see it reflecting off the ISS's solar panels up in the sky. Have a nice piece of fruit and wave hello. It's riddle time. Last week's riddle was, this old one runs forever but never moves at all. He has not lungs nor throat, but still a mighty roaring call. What is it? The answer? A waterfall. Today's riddle is, a cowboy rode into town on Friday. He stayed for 3 nights, and then he rode out on Friday. How? The cowboy rode into town on Friday, stayed for 3 nights, and then rode out on Friday. How? Well, I'll give you the answer next week, but you got to make sure to subscribe or follow the Kids Morning News Network podcast so you don't miss it. On this day in 1984, a show about a very useful train engine was first broadcast on TV in Great Britain. Thomas and Friends kept chugging along for 24 seasons and 584 episodes. It made its first station stop here in the US in 1989. Maybe you watched Thomas when you were little, or maybe you watch it now. It was based on a series of books. 42 books, wow, that's a big series, that were created by a minister named Wilbert Awdry and first published in 1945. Now maybe you guessed this already, but he liked trains. He used to hear their whistles as he lay in bed at night when he was a kid. Like a bunch of other children's books, the Thomas stories started as stories Awdry told his own son, Christopher. Christopher was in bed for a while with measles, and Reverend Awdry started telling him poems about trains and made up stories about trains. He gave the trains names like Gordon, Edward, and Henry. After a while, his wife convinced him to send some of his stories to a book publisher, and pretty soon, those were the beginning of the series. But wait a minute, where's Thomas? Well, Thomas didn't come around until later when Christopher got a toy train for Christmas called Thomas. He asked his father to write stories about this train, and those stories became the second book. And like I said, Reverend Awdry loved real-life trains so much that he actually wrote his train stories based on real-life events that he read about. And eventually, when he couldn't find any new stories or think up anything else, his son, Christopher, now all grown up, took over and wrote the rest of the books. So happy birthday to the island of Sodor and all the interesting characters who live there. Let's say you're sitting in your house one night and you hear something smash into a car outside. What's your first thought? Maybe a tree branch? Or an entire tree? Your first thought probably wasn't a meteorite, but on October 9th, 1992, that's exactly what happened. A 2-ton meteorite entered the Earth's atmosphere early in the evening and blazed a fiery trail across the sky that people saw in Kentucky, and then West Virginia, and then Washington, D.C., and then Pennsylvania. And you know how meteorites work. It was burning up and breaking into pieces the whole time. Finally, the 27-pound chunk that was left went squappo and slammed into the trunk of a car in Peekskill, New York. Fortunately, the car was parked at the time. The owner of the car, a 22-year-old woman, heard the crash and went outside to find a hole in her car and the meteor smoking in the earth underneath it. Now remember, this happened on this day, October 9th. And what sports are kids in school playing in the evenings these days? Football. This was in 1992, before cell phones, but not before video recorders. And a lot of people watching football games turned their cameras to the sky and caught the Peekskill meteorite coming down. Turned out to be really helpful for scientists. And the woman whose car got hit? Well, reportedly she just bought it for $400, and at first she called the police to find out who threw a rock at her car. But a neighbor pointed out that the rock went through the car, and no person was strong enough to do that. She was able to sell the car, the meteorite car, for $25,000. And she sold the meteorite for twice that much. So it was kind of a gift from outer space for her. All right, that's the show. Thank you very much for listening. Please follow or subscribe to the Kids Morning News Network podcast on your podcast player, app, smart device, or whatever you're using to hear this week's show. I will be back next Wednesday, and I hope that you are too. From the KMNN Newsroom, this is Alex, signing off.